In the dim glow of my study, I discovered that the only way to conjure the darkest tales was to bleed them out of reality. I used to be known as a successful horror writer, a purveyor of nightmares that seeped into the dreams of my readers. My books flew off the shelves, and my fans eagerly awaited the next twisted tale I would conjure. But one day, the words stopped flowing. My once fertile mind became a barren wasteland, devoid of the macabre inspiration that had driven my success. Writer's block had shackled me, and I was desperate to break free. Days turned into weeks, and still, my fingers hovered uselessly above the keyboard. The pressure was mounting. I needed to deliver my next novel to my publisher, but the page remained blank. I felt like I was drowning, and then it happened. It was a rainy night when I first killed someone. I had gone out for a walk, hoping the storm would clear my head. The streets were deserted, and I relished the solitude. But then I saw him. A man staggering out of a bar, clearly drunk and oblivious. He slipped and fell into a puddle, cursing loudly. I don't know what came over me, but something dark awakened within. I approached him, intending to help, but he lashed out at me, and in a fit of anger, I pushed him back. His head struck the curb with a sickening crack. Panic surged through me as I realized he wasn't moving. I knelt beside him, my hands trembling, and felt for a pulse. Nothing. He was dead. My heart pounded in my chest as I dragged his lifeless body into a nearby alley. I covered him with some old newspapers and hurried home, my mind racing. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of his lifeless eyes haunted me, but amidst the horror, I felt a strange exhilaration. The fear, the adrenaline. It was intoxicating. The next day, I sat at my desk, and for the first time in months, the words flowed. My fingers danced across the keyboard, driven by the memory of his death. The story that emerged was darker and more vivid than anything I had written before. I felt alive, consumed by the creative fire that had been reignited by that fateful encounter. The book was a success. My readers devoured it, praising the chilling realism of the horror. But I knew the truth. The darkness in my story was real because it was born from my own actions. I should have been horrified, but instead, I felt powerful. The writer's block had been shattered, and I knew what I had to do to keep the inspiration flowing. I became meticulous in my planning. Each victim was carefully selected, each kill executed with precision. The next target was a reclusive artist who lived in a dilapidated house on the outskirts of town. I watched her for days, studying her routines. One night, I broke into her home, silently moving through the darkened rooms. She was asleep, unaware of my presence. I gagged her to muffle her screams and tied her to a chair in her studio. The look of terror in her eyes as she woke up was almost poetic. I took her own paintbrushes and dipped them in her blood, creating a grotesque masterpiece on the canvas. Each stroke was a mix of crimson and horror, a chilling reflection of my descent into madness. Her final breaths were the climax of my macabre creation. Another victim was a jogger, a young woman who ran through the park every morning. I followed her route, waiting for the perfect moment. One foggy dawn, I made my move. I tackled her into a secluded area, using her own headphones to strangle her. The music from her playlist became a haunting soundtrack to her last moments. As she gasped for air, I could feel the rush of inspiration returning. I left her body arranged in a twisted pose, like a broken marionette, before disappearing into the mist. The police began to notice the pattern. The media dubbed the killer the Blood Scribe, a nod to the bloody trail that seemed to follow the release of each new book. They had no idea the killer was the very author they celebrated. As the body count rose, so did my fame. I was a best-selling author, my name synonymous with horror. But inside, I felt the madness growing. the line between fiction and reality blurred, and I found myself lost in the labyrinth of my own creation. Each kill brought a brief surge of inspiration, but it was fleeting. The darkness demanded more. The police closed in, their investigation tightening around me like a noose. They discovered the connections between the murders and my books, but they couldn't prove anything. I was too careful, too cunning. Yet, the thrill of evading capture only fueled my insanity. One night, as I sat at my desk, writing the final chapter of my latest book, I heard a knock at the door. My heart raced as I opened it to find two detectives standing on my doorstep. They had questions, suspicions, but no evidence. I invited them in, my mind already plotting their demise. As they sat in my study, I offered them tea, laced with a potent sedative. Their eyes grew heavy, and one by one, they slumped over. I dragged their unconscious bodies to the basement, where my makeshift torture chamber awaited. They would be my final masterpiece, the climax of my twisted tale. I documented their suffering in vivid detail, every scream, every plea for mercy, transcribed onto the pages of my book. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction as I crafted their demise, knowing that this story would be my magnum opus. But as I typed the final words, I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. Panic gripped me. I had been so consumed by my writing that I hadn't noticed the neighbors seeing the detectives enter my house and never leave. I had to escape. Grabbing my manuscript and a few essentials, I fled through the back door, disappearing into the night. I ran through the darkened streets, the sirens growing louder behind me. My mind raced, trying to think of a safe place. There was only one person who might understand. My publisher, Thomas. I made my way to his office, my heart pounding in my chest. Thomas was working late, as usual, when I burst in, disheveled and desperate. He looked up, startled by my appearance. I told him everything in a torrent of words. The murders, the inspiration, the police. I could see the disbelief and horror in his eyes, but I needed him to understand. He had to help me. Thomas nodded slowly, trying to process the information. He reached for his phone, but I could tell from the subtle tension in his movements that he was going to call the police. My heart sank. I thought he understood, but he was just like the rest. Desperation clawed at me. I moved closer to him, my voice low and urgent, explaining how each kill had fueled my creativity, how it had brought my stories to life. But his eyes betrayed him. He was frightened, ready to betray me to save himself. I had no choice. I couldn't let him call the police. My hands shook as I approached him, but my resolve was steel. I grabbed his phone, smashing it against the desk. The look of shock on his face was almost tragic. I could see his mind racing, searching for a way out. With a twisted smile, I leaned in close. "Thomas, you were always my biggest supporter," I whispered. "You understood my need for authenticity in my stories." His eyes widened in fear as he realized what was coming. I could see the silent plea in his gaze, the hope that I might spare him. But the darkness within me was too strong, too demanding. I had to keep the inspiration flowing. I raised my hand, the glint of a blade catching the dim light of his office. "I think I've just found my new inspiration," I said softly, my voice barely a whisper. The fear in his eyes fueled me, the anticipation of his final moments igniting the spark of creativity once more. As the ink of madness flows, so too does the blood of my inspiration. My tale was shared and retold, going viral for its chilling realism and the twisted descent of a mind consumed by darkness. It left viewers on the edge of their seats, haunted by the thought that sometimes, the scariest stories are the ones born from reality.
Your support means everything to us. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, share, and subscribe. Click the video on the screen for more shadowy delights.